They say history repeats itself, but I didn't think I'd be mopping up spilled vitality blend while the galaxy fell apart. Oh, pardon me, I should introduce myself. I'm Lela Xorrin, Assistant Sanitation Specialist for the Galactic Council, or as I like to call it, the person they yell at when there's synthetic caffeine spills during urgent crises. It's not the most glamorous position, but it does come with perks. For example, when the galaxy is on the verge of chaos, I get a front row seat. Take today, for instance. Word had just come in that a human artist, yes, human, had disappeared during a performance on Zynar Prime. Blood traces found. No body. Which, in council terms, meant the situation had graduated from potential diplomatic issue to imminent galactic catastrophe. You see, 30 years ago, someone killed a human, a diplomat, if I remember correctly. Back then, most species had no idea what the so-called Deathworlders were capable of. Sure, humans were peaceful, cooperative, even charming in their quirky obsession with art and culture. But some species whispered the word Deathworlder like a curse. I'd heard the stories, everyone had, but few people really believed them. Not until 30 years ago. I was a young child back then, so I only remember bits and pieces, but let me tell you, the older council staff still pale at the mere mention of it. What I do know is that the species responsible no longer exists. Well, that's not entirely true. Some survivors are still out there, but they're, let's just say, unrecognizable. Humanity called it a proportional response. The rest of us call it a cautionary tale. And now? Now someone's gone and done it again. It started with whispers. I'd been mopping up spilled calyx broth in the main chamber when I overheard Representative Thrallen's assistant whisper to another aide. Something about Zynar Prime and an incident. Zynar Prime has incidents every other day. Oppressive regimes tend to generate those. So nothing special about that. But then High Counselor Vrina showed up, and let me tell you, she never leaves her office unless things are about to get bad. Her face, made of shifting crystalline plates, had gone an unsettling shade of violet. "Summon the emergency council," she said, her voice clipped. "And notify the human delegation immediately." That was when I knew this wasn't just any incident. Now, Zynar Prime isn't exactly a vacation hotspot. It's a militarized, heavily stratified society where art is considered a frivolity at best and treasonous at worst. So why was a human artist, a singer, apparently, performing there? Humans have this strange habit of wandering into places they don't belong, armed with nothing but optimism and a guitar case. The artist's name was Aria Divine. Famous, apparently. Not that I would care, my species doesn't have ears, per se, so music isn't exactly our thing. But based on the snippets of conversation I overheard while delivering refreshments, she was kind of a big deal. A voice that could move stars, according to the human delegation's envoy. Not literally, I assume, though with humans, who knows? Anyway, Aria Divine had gone to Zynar Prime to perform a series of concerts. And then, halfway through her tour, she vanished. Blood traces were found in her dressing room. The Zynarians claimed they were investigating. The council chamber claimed this was an urgent matter requiring immediate attention. And me? I claimed this was the worst possible time for someone to spill steaming Hilux tea all over the floor. Again. The tension was palpable. Every time I passed the chamber with my cart of cleaning supplies, I caught snippets of panicked conversations. "Do you think they'll respond like last time?" one representative whispered. "It's been 30 years. "Maybe they've mellowed," another said, though their tone suggested they didn't believe it. By mid-morning, the council had devolved into its usual chaos, representatives shouting over one another, aides rushing around with data pads, and someone tripping over a chair, again. And through it all, one word kept popping up: Deathworlders. The thing about humans is they don't look like Deathworlders. They look fragile. Soft. But if you've studied their history, and I have, because you pick up a lot when you clean the council archives late at night, you know the truth. Humans don't survive because they're strong. They survive because they're relentless. And when they're pushed, well, there's a reason people call them Deathworlders. I won't lie, I'm curious about what happens next. But I'm also a little terrified. Zynar Prime isn't some backwater planet. They're militarily strong, with fleets that rival some of the Council's major powers. If the humans retaliate, and let's face it, they will, this won't just be a diplomatic incident. This will be a war. And me? I'll be right here, mop in hand, cleaning up the mess. Literally. There's a particular kind of tension that settles over the Galactic Council when humans are involved. It's a quiet, gnawing dread that turns even the most self-assured representatives into jittery bundles of nerves. Today, that tension was almost palpable, clinging to every conversation, every whispered exchange. And as always, I was there, pushing my cleaning cart through the chaos and pretending I didn't hear a word. The council chamber was in full panic mode. The mysterious disappearance of Aria Divine, a human artist performing on Zynar Prime, had thrown the galaxy's finest diplomats into utter disarray. Most of the representatives had no idea who she really was, of course. To them, she was just another human visitor who'd run afoul of Zynar's strict society. But a select few, the ones who suddenly looked like they might faint, clearly knew more. I could guess why. About 2 weeks ago, I'd been assigned to clean the council's restricted archives. It was supposed to be routine: wipe down the consoles, disinfect the data pads, make sure nothing got sticky. But someone had left a terminal unlocked. And you know what they say about curiosity. The file I stumbled upon was enlightening. Aria Divine wasn't just a singer. Her real name was Lena Ward. She was the daughter of President Callan Ward, one of the most influential human leaders out there. Apparently, she wasn't interested in politics. She was traveling the galaxy pursuing her passion as a singer. This is something you can do when you are rich and don't have to scrub other people's spilled beverages off the floor to pay the bills. I didn't dwell on it at the time. Secrets like that weren't mine to share, and besides, what could I do with such information? Nothing. Not a thing. So I pushed the thought aside and carried on with my work. The council was buzzing with speculation. "She's a high-profile human," one representative whispered to another. "Surely, the humans will understand this was an accident." "An accident?" scoffed a tentacled ambassador from the Relic Alliance. There was blood in her dressing room. Human blood. "You know what they'll think." "They'll want proof," someone else chimed in. "If we can't prove she's alive." I wheeled my cart past their huddle, doing my best to look oblivious. Internally, I couldn't help but smirk. Proof? They wouldn't find proof. Not the kind they were hoping for. By mid-afternoon, the council chamber was in full meltdown mode. Reports were trickling in that human trade ships were leaving neutral space. Entire colonies had gone silent, and energy readings near Earth's military sectors were spiking. "They're mobilizing," muttered a crystalline representative, their edges flickering with unease. "It's just like 30 years ago." "They're waiting." "They haven't even issued a threat," another protested. "They might be investigating." The High Counselor silenced them with a sharp gesture. "Enough. We must tread carefully." If this escalates, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Meanwhile, Zynar Prime was doubling down. Their official statement claimed they were committed to uncovering the truth but insisted Lena's disappearance was likely the work of a disgruntled individual. Behind closed doors, however, it was clear they weren't interested in cooperating. They'd begun fortifying their borders and deploying defensive fleets, actions that only fueled humanity's silence. I caught snippets of conversation as I cleaned the High Counselor's office later that day. "They haven't even confirmed her importance," one aide said nervously. "They don't need to," replied another. "If she's dead, they'll respond. You've read the reports from 30 years ago. This will be worse." I tuned them out, scrubbing at a particularly stubborn stain on the floor. They didn't know how right they were. By the time I returned to the main chamber, the tension had reached a boiling point. The council was debating whether to inform humanity of Lena's true identity, hoping it might buy them time. If they find out who she is, argued a relic representative, they'll demand answers. "We don't have any. We'll look complicit." If they don't find out, countered an Aevan ambassador, and they discover the truth on their own, it will be catastrophic. The High Counselor was silent, her crystalline form shifting between muted shades of blue and gray. "We have no proof of her death," she said finally. "Until we do, we must proceed cautiously. Humanity may yet." Her words were interrupted by a sudden alert. A holographic message appeared in the center of the chamber, glowing with stark white text. "Classified report, decrypted from Council Terminal. Status, urgent. Content, Aria Divine confirmed deceased. Evidence implicates Zynar Prime." The chamber fell silent. "Who sent this?" demanded the High Counselor, her voice trembling with suppressed panic. An aide rushed to one of the consoles, frantically scanning the message. "It came from one of our own systems. I can't determine the source." The representatives exchanged horrified glances as the implications sank in. Someone within the council had just delivered humanity the final spark they needed. I pushed my cart out of the chamber as the shouting began again, keeping my expression carefully neutral. If anyone noticed me at all, they would have seen nothing but a dutiful worker going about her job. Inside, I was smiling. The council chamber had been louder than a sunstorm all day, and by the time I finally clocked out, my ears, or what passes for them, felt like they'd been through a hyperspace grinder. Humanity's carefully coordinated strikes had begun, targeting Zynar Prime's military points like a precise surgeon excising tumors. Zynar had, of course, retaliated, targeting human trade convoys and colonies. The council, predictably, was doing what it does best, panicking and accomplishing absolutely nothing. As I trudged home through the brightly lit corridors of the council sector, I couldn't help but shake my head. Here we were, the galaxy's greatest minds, supposedly tasked with keeping the peace, and they were scrambling like nestlings in a windstorm. Meanwhile, two of the most dangerous civilizations in the galaxy were warming up for what could only be described as the cosmic equivalent of a bar fight with plasma grenades. All according to plan. When I finally reached my apartment, I keyed in the lock code and stepped inside. The comforting hum of the Holo News greeted me, along with the smell of, was that wine? "Welcome back," Aria Divine called from the couch. She was lounging in the most relaxed way possible, a glass of wine in hand and an empty bottle on the table. "Hope you don't mind, but I helped myself. Your drink selection is questionable, but it'll do in a pinch." The sheer audacity of her tone would have been funny if it weren't so frustrating. There she was, Aria Divine, singer, celebrity, and secret daughter of humanity's most powerful leader, lounging in my dingy apartment like it was a luxury suite. The galaxy was about to implode, and she was humming one of her own songs. "You're drunk," I said flatly, tossing my bag onto the counter. "Absolutely," she replied with a grin, raising her glass. "Cheers." This was almost too perfect. I sat down across from her, watching as she swirled her drink like some aristocrat on a pleasure cruise. She didn't even realize the door was locked, or that she wasn't going anywhere. "You're locked in here, you know," I said after a moment, my tone casual. She blinked at me, clearly not registering the words. Huh? Locked in? What are you talking about? You've been kidnapped, I said simply, leaning back in my chair. It took a second for the words to sink in. When they did, she stared at me, then burst out laughing. Kidnapped? That's a good one. You're funny. I didn't laugh. I just looked at her. Slowly, her expression shifted from amusement to confusion, then to fear. She set her glass down, her hands trembling slightly. Wait, you're serious? Very. She stood abruptly, her posture rigid. Do you have any idea who I am? Oh, I know exactly who you are, Lena, I said, my voice taking on a sharper edge. You're the daughter of Callan Ward, president of the Terran Confederation. You're not just a singer. You're humanity's little princess. Her mouth opened, then closed, her fear giving way to anger. If you think you can ransom me. This isn't about ransom, I interrupted, my tone light but with an undercurrent of steel. This is about balance. About justice. Her laugh was sharp and bitter. Justice? What does that even mean? Do you think my father is going to let this slide? Do you have any idea what you've done? I smiled, leaning forward. Oh, I know exactly what I've done. I've started a war. A war between humanity and Zynar Prime. And there's no stopping it now. Her voice was shaking now, but her anger fought its way through. This is about me, isn't it? You're using me to start this war. Using you? I repeated, smirking. You make it sound so impersonal. Let's call it, strategically placing you in the right position. And it worked perfectly, didn't it? Humanity thinks Zynar killed you, and now they're out for blood. Her eyes widened as the realization hit, the fear finally eclipsing her defiance. You're the reason they're fighting. You set this up. Of course I did, I said, spreading my arms theatrically. You'd be amazed how many council terminals are left unsecured. A few tweaks, a little fake intel, and voila, suddenly humanity's proportional response kicks in. The rest, as they say, is history in the making. You're insane, she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Insane? I tilted my head, pretending to consider. No. I'm just a fast learner. 30 years ago, humanity taught me how to turn grief into action. They called it proportional response. I call it getting even. She flinched at my words, and I felt a flicker of satisfaction. You think your people are so righteous, I continued, my tone cutting. But my family wasn't part of your war. My parents. My little brother. They weren't soldiers. They were just there. Collateral damage, you called it. Unfortunate. Necessary. Her voice cracked. That wasn't me. That wasn't. It doesn't matter, I said, cutting her off. What matters is that now you'll know what it feels like. What it's like to lose everything. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the soft murmur of the hollow news. Outside, humanity and Zynar were tearing into each other, their fleets clashing in carefully calculated strikes. The council would spend the next few days arguing about what to do, but it wouldn't matter. The wheels were already in motion, and there was no turning back. You'll never win, she said finally, her voice low but steady. Maybe not, I replied, leaning back in my chair. But I don't care. Winning was never the point. She looked at me with a mix of fear and pity, but I didn't flinch. I'd done what I set out to do. And as the galaxy burned, I felt nothing.